What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the Riding Dad channel, or welcome if it's your first time here. Either way, very glad to have you. We're talking about Stage 2, we're talking about dyno numbers, we're talking about my 2020 Lowrider S. Let's roll that intro, we'll get into it.
Riding Dad YouTube channel, it's the Riding Dad YouTube channel, it's the Riding Dad YouTube channel, it's the Riding Dad.
Okay, so some of you guys got a sneak peek into what I'm about to talk about, and those guys would be the guys that were DMing me on Instagram because you saw my story post about the lope sound of my Stage 2. For those of you who don't know what a Stage 2 is or don't have Harleys, because I believe Harley's the only one that consider this a Stage 2 or whatever, a Stage 2 is essentially a cam upgrade. There's some small stuff that goes with it or whatever, but essentially it means cams. It's nothing to do with displacement, getting a big bore, or anything like that. Harley considers a Stage 1 an exhaust and an intake pretty much, and Stage 2 is a cam job, and then Stage 3 and 4 have to do with, you know, different cubic inch displacement upgrades and stuff for your cylinders and your boards and stuff like that. So Stage 2, as of now, I believe this is probably going to be the end of the road for this bike performance-wise. I might do some stuff, small stuff, definitely some cosmetic stuff still to come, but I don't plan on getting a big bore kit for this bike. I know I think I said that about not doing a Stage 2 like last year or whatever, so who knows. It's like an addiction. I can't ever leave it. I'm sure you guys know exactly what I'm talking about. But without further ado, we're gonna get into the numbers. I know that's why you guys clicked on this. I do have the 114 Milwaukee 8 engine in this bike. I will tell you all the things I have done to it prior to telling you my Stage 2 numbers. I did not mess with the intake, manifold, or throttle body or anything like that. I didn't mess with any of that. As of this tune, I had a Trask Assault air cleaner, and I had an external breather kit for the air cleaner. I have a TBR 2-in-1 Comp S exhaust. I have a Dyno Jet Power Vision. That's what I'm running to tune the bike, and that's what my tuner did for it. I will also say that this is one install I did not do by myself, not because I didn't feel like I was capable of doing it, but because I did not have the tools for it. There are some very specific tools you'll need, like a bearing, seater, and puller for this job that I did not have, and to get the proper tools, it was several $100s. My install guy only charged me several $100s, and it was a very minimal difference for him to do it versus me, and I was going to have to take it to him to get a tune anyway, so I figured let me just get it all done with him and call it a day. I did go with 5.5 injectors. I went with a Jim's 821 cam at the recommendation of my guy that I used. I have it over at West Coast Cycles. What else did I get? I got an S&S oil pump, and we're going to talk about that in a second after I tell you guys the numbers, so remind me if I forget, like you guys can remind me. And then I got S&S precision lifters as well. So you guys have probably never heard of Jim's V-Twin, like I hadn't at the time of my install. But if you want to learn more about their stuff, go to Jim's V-Twin. He has a Facebook page or whatever. Really cool guy, very, very knowledgeable about what he's doing. Has a very lengthy history of knowing what he's doing. So, and I went with him at the recommendation of West Coast Cycles Tony that did my whole stuff, my whole setup and everything. So. Yeah, super good cam. It's comparable to like a 475 from S&S as far as like lift goes, but obviously there's way more things that go into it. But you know, if you want to look at similar style lift cams or whatever, it's close to that, but again, way different. And we're gonna get into numbers in a second. I do also want to bring up the fact that I did not do tappet cuffs. Either from S&S or I think honestly they might be the only ones that do it, but I did not do them from them or anybody, again at the recommendation of my guy that did it, primarily because he said really you don't have any issues with those until you get into incredibly high lift cams, which you wouldn't be doing with a stock bore setup anyway, and he said just honestly to save your money, he's never seen them fail in a build that I'm, you know, similar to mine, so I just went ahead and left them. I also did not do an intake or a throttle body or anything like that. Again, at the discretion or recommendation of the guy that did my stuff. He said that basically there's no reason to run something like that with my build. You could possibly squeak by maybe like an extra 1 or 2, you know, HP or torques or whatever, but it's such a minimal thing, a lot higher expense, and really no necessary reason to run it unless you're doing like a big bore kit in general. And I understand somebody out there is gonna be like, but the stock one's all plastic and garbage and warps and everything. Yes, I understand the, whatever, how many claims you've heard of that happening, whatever. I've never had any issue with mine. In addition to that, the Stage 2 that I run with the SNS oil pump makes the bike run cooler in general. So if you were worried about warping or anything from the plastic, you would have even less of a worry doing this kind of build for just the Stage 2, whatever. So not worried about it. Again, Tony at West Coast Cycle said really no issue to do it with my build at all. He's done a ton of builds without it, specifically recommending not to do it for like a Stage 2 like I'm doing. So trusted him, but let's go ahead and get into the numbers. And again, remind me to talk about that SNS oil pump because that is a big deal. But numbers, I'm going to, right now, I'll put it on the screen so you can look at it, so you can either pause it before, after, talk, whatever, but it'll be up the whole time I'm talking about it. In fact, I'll move over a little bit, that way there's more of a spot for it. Actually, I'll move where the bike is, so you, whole blank area for you to look at it. So before, on my Stage 1, professionally tuned, I was running 91.89 horsepower max, and then max torque of 109.51. Post Stage 2 with my Jim's 21 cam, Jim's V-twin, oh my god, I cannot talk. Jim's V-twin 821, my 5.5 injectors, everything we just talked about. I'm running a max horsepower of 118.43 and a max torque of 125.31. Now again, those numbers mean nothing unless it's usable torque and horsepower, which you can clearly see on the graph. It runs great. If you're looking at the graph and you're having trouble distinguishing, because sometimes the light blue versus dark blue and light red versus dark red are pretty hard to tell on the screen and stuff, especially depending on if you're looking at it on a phone or TV or whatever. Everybody's color, charts are different. So the top red and blue are going to be torque, and the bottom red and blue are going to be horsepower. Both reds are new, both blues are old as far as horsepower and torque, Stage 1 versus Stage 2. The Stage 2 is red, Stage 1 is blue. Upper lines, again, are torque, and lower lines on the graph are horsepower. So hopefully that kind of helped you distinguish what was what. Yeah, but I'm super, super happy with the numbers. I'm currently running, it'll be another video talking about it, but I'm currently running the Metzeler Cruise Tech tires on it. In addition to all the other great things that the Cruise Techs do, I've never had any issue with rear tire hookup or anything. It really does a good job of harnessing all the power into usable power, but it's great. It runs, it's like a completely new bike. There's just globs and globs of power all over the power band, and it's so fun. I was also told, and you could definitely experience it firsthand from riding it, that this cam does not like low RPMs. In general, M8s don't like low RPMs anyway. I'm talking like 1.5-ish, somewhere like there, real low, like lugging the motor. That's what happens when you get all of your issues for extra blow-by and stuff like that. They like higher RPMs. It keeps the oil flowing, keeps the oil pump at a higher rate and everything like that. So I mean, you could see on the graph, but I've been running this almost like a sport bike. I mean, obviously it's not revving up to 18,000 RPM, but I've been running this. I don't let it get below 2,500 RPM. I typically, the lowest, if I have to, will be like 2,000 RPM, especially if I'm cruising. Maybe I'll keep it at like 2,000. But especially if I'm getting, into turns and in and out of corners and stuff like that, as much as I can for Florida at least, I've been running it real high, way up in the red line. The red line, I'm not sure exactly what it is, but it feels like it's increased by maybe 1.5, 2-ish, somewhere around there. But there is usable power, like before on a Stage 1 or whatever, especially if you have one, you know what I'm talking about, either a 107 or a 114. You hit about 4-ish to 5,000 RPM and you get almost nothing. Like it just keeps going. It's like, eh. With this, you hit the throttle and it's like you're almost back down at 25 or 3,000 RPM. It just keeps it just pushes so hard. There's so much usable torque. There's so much horsepower for the Stage 2. For the amount of money on the Stage 2 versus what you would do to like a 128, a 124, 131, any of those larger displacement, bigger bore kits, this is awesome, especially for the money. It's a brand new bike. You're still keeping your stock cylinders and heads, and most of the bike is stock. You're basically just putting in a cam. It's awesome. Again, check out Jim's V-twin on Facebook if you want to know more about him and his credentials and stuff. Super good cam. I mean, I'm super happy with it. I love it. I absolutely love this bike now. I do want to talk about that SNS oil pump, right? You guys, I don't know if you guys reminded me or not. I obviously can't hear you, and you may be watching this a year after I posted it for, who knows. So for those of you who don't know, they were having issues with the oil pumps on the M8s, specifically 17, 18, and 19 year models. They fixed it in the 20 and 21, and not every motor was having these issues. It was kind of like a chance, but it was very likely to happen if you had a 17, 18, or 19 year model. What was happening was sumping. It was a sumping issue. Harley did some changes to it. SNS and fueling, and then I guess the Screaming Eagle from HD, if you buy into buying overpriced Harley and Screaming Eagle parts for aftermarket stuff or whatever, but those all had fixes to whatever. So Harley's answer is their stock configuration, part of their rendition of their newer oil pumps. Part of that was to put a gap in there for like an O-ring seating, and then include an O-ring in there. So SNS's answer to this, instead of manufacturing the same ones, they manufacture a new style oil pump. Their new style oil pump has that groove just like the Harley 20 and up oil pumps do, and their aftermarket oil pumps do. But the SNS directions don't come with directions to explain that. It doesn't come with even an updated picture of it, and it doesn't come with that new O-ring, or I guess it is an O-ring. It's not a ring though, it's like a little sealant or a sealer. But you would have to replace that with the old, swap it over from the old Harley oil pump that you're taking out into the new SNS oil pump. Now the reason I went with an SNS oil pump, I figured even though I don't have any issues, it helps run cooler. It reduces something in general. In general, it's a much better pump. It's an upgrade. When you already have the cam out of that cam chest and everything, why not go with the SNS oil pump? It's a few $100s extra, and it's going to help the motor run more efficient and cooler. So I went ahead and did that when I was in there. That's, if you're having a question on why I even did that, if I had a 20 model bike and that wasn't an issue with the 20 years. Yes, that is why. I understand that. So yes, SNS oil pump. Just to let you guys know, if you have a shop that hasn't really, for whatever reason, had any run-ins with the newer oil pumps, just try to give them a heads up. My guy specifically talked to SNS on the phone, and he explained that, to SNS what the issue was about the instructions not having it, and SNS was like, yeah, typically guys will call us about that or just see stuff or whatever, and that's why we haven't included it. I still like SNS a lot. I think that part of it was kind of crappy to do, especially for shops that, there's some shops that just do, from memory. This is exactly what we do for this and this and this. But there's other shops that go by the book every single time to keep from messing up a torque spec, to keep from messing up something if such as this, when a model change that you might not know about, or, that they start releasing or whatever and you're getting old and new ones. So they go by the book every single time. To keep from having issues, and then SNS specifically doesn't put it in the directions or anything like that. So kind of a weird thing, but just as a heads up for you guys, whether you're doing it on your own or if you're going to take it to a shop, maybe just give them a heads up just in case or whatever. I don't know, as of this video, SNS may have added it to the directions, but I know those new oil pumps have been out for quite some time, and SNS is not doing any direction changes as of right now, or any inserts or anything giving the installer a heads up. So just letting you know. But yeah, otherwise, super, super happy with my Stage 2. I love it. It sounds really, really good. I guess now would be a really good time to play a sound clip for you. So here you go. Here is an audio clip of my bike with the Jim's A21 cam. Yeah, so sounds killer. I will also say it's probably hard to understand, in video and stuff like that. If you were curious what my prior Stage 1 sounded like, go ahead and check out my TBR. In general, I have a review on my TBR Comp S because it's the same exhaust. I have a ton of sound clips on that, so you can definitely hear what it sounds like on idle. But yeah, the cam job in general, Stage 2 is going to open up your throatiness and your sound profile of your bike completely in general, but then obviously the different lifts and durations and everything have to do with, what your lope sound and everything will sound like. But yeah, super, it's way louder than in general it was before, but then also you combine it with that cam sound, and anytime you're idling and about to park it or pull into a station or whatever, everybody hears it and they say, oh, if you know anything about bikes, that bike has a cam. So it's just a little kind of an added flex on them fools, and it's pretty cool. But yeah, that's about it for it, guys. Stage 2. I will actually, the next video I have, by the time you're watching the next video, I'm either going to be getting ready to or be in North Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia area. If you haven't heard, I am taking a trip with my buddy Motos and Mullets. We're going to be there July 5th through the 9th, and we're going to be riding primarily the 4th through the 6th through the 8th. I almost done screwed that up. The public education system failed my math for a little bit there. But yeah, so we're going to be riding primarily that Tuesday through Thursday. We're getting there late Monday, and we're leaving early Friday to get back to our families and stuff. But we're going to be staying in the Murphy area, but we're going to be taking at least one day trip Tail of the Dragon. I know a few of you have contacted me on Instagram, sent me a DM and said, hey, I'm going to be there this day and time, or I'm going to be there this hour or whatever. Where are you guys going to be there? I live an hour away. I was thinking of meeting up with you guys and, going for a ride on the Tail of the Dragon or whatever. So if you're going to be in the area, send me a DM. We'll definitely love to, meet with you somewhere. I have a ton of stickers I'm looking to give out. I mean, that's why I bought them, to give them out. I don't know if Motos and Mullets has any stickers. I don't think he has, and I think it's too late for him to get them now anyway. But yeah, we get stickers. We'll take a ride on the Dragon with you or whatever. Some pics for the DMs, or not for the DMs, pictures for the Instagram. I don't need your pictures in my DMs or whatever. But yeah, just let me know. It's going to be a good time. The weather should be great. Anything's better than this hellhole of Florida that I've been in. But yeah, that's about it, guys. I appreciate it very much. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to my channel, go ahead and turn on post notifications. Make sure those are turned on. Check out any of the videos and any of the links that are in the description of this video. Watch one or both of the videos that are in the end of this video that are going to roll in about 3 seconds. And until the next time, guys, ride safe, have fun. Dad out.